All right, this week we are going to look at a story told in comic book form and in animation to see how they approach the same story in different ways. If you're new here, hi, I am writer and artist Dan Finlay, and this is The Story Grind, a show where we study storytelling so we can become better storytellers. On today's episode, we are studying issue 1 of Invincible from Skybound and Image Comics and episode 1 of Invincible, the cartoon, by Skybound Entertainment, Wind Sun Sky Entertainment, Point Grey Pictures, and Amazon MGM Studios. But before we roll the title screen, check this out. I'm always telling you that I'm a writer and artist, right? Well, now you can actually see the kind of stuff that I am writing and drawing because I have started a Substack where you can now see me making my very first graphic novel called Dreamborn. I'm posting pages every Monday, so if you want to follow along as I make the thing, subscribe to my Substack. Link is in the description below. All right, if you like getting into the weeds and the craft of storytelling and trying to get better at it, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon below. So if you've watched this show, The Story Grind, you'll know that I am not a big superhero fan anymore. When the Invincible comic was originally published back in 2003, it really wasn't on my radar. But I did watch the Invincible cartoon, and I was surprised at how good it was. So much so that I went back and read the comic. So for this episode, we're going to start with the comic, and then we'll take a look at the animation and compare the two. So here's the creative team for the comic. Like I said, it was originally published in 2003 and ran for 144 issues, completing its run in 2018. The first issue is only 22 pages long. Scene 1, 3 pages long. We open in the middle of the action. Invincible flies through the air carrying a man with a bomb strapped to his chest. The clock says that they only have 13 seconds left until it explodes. Invincible says, "You really ruined my afternoon." This is a great first line because it touches on the theme of the series. Invincible is trying to live a normal life, and it is constantly being ruined by bad guys. It makes me think of shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or some Spider-Man comics. All characters who are like imbued with a special ability while trying to live a normal life. And it's really a great point of empathy for any story. I mean, who couldn't empathize with someone just trying to live a normal life and, problems keep cropping up and derailing your goals, right? I think that's something everybody can jump on board with. Okay, back to the scene. Invincible tosses the man into the air and the bomb explodes. Invincible says that if he keeps this up, he's going to give himself a heart attack. And this is the end of our cold open. All right, scene 2, 2 pages long. Now we flash back to 4 months earlier, where Invincible's mother is banging on the bathroom door. She's saying that if he keeps this up, he's going to give himself a heart attack. Mark says he's just reading a comic book. We learn that this is Invincible before he gets his superpowers. He's a teenage boy named Mark. His mother is banging on the door because he's going to be late for school. Now ready, Mark asks his mom where Dad is at. He didn't come home last night. They turn on the TV to show a superhero named Omni-Man, a Superman analog, fighting a dragon-like monster in Taiwan. Mark says, now they know where Dad is. So this scene does some nice world building in a short amount of time. Mark is a high school student who likes comics. Mark's father is a superhero, and his being out fighting bad guys is pretty routine. Neither Mark nor his mom seem to be worried. That's a lot of info for 2 pages, delivered in a very organic way. Scene 3, 2 pages long. Mark is at school when his friend William asks him if he wants to hang out. Mark can't because he has to go to work at Burger Mart. We see Mark behind the restaurant throwing trash into the dumpster when he overshoots and throws the garbage high into the sky. There's a look of shock on his face, then he says, "It's about time." So Mark was a regular teenage boy, but he's finally obtained his powers. We're only 8 pages in, and the first 3 pages are actually dedicated to action, so technically we're only 5 pages into Mark's ordinary world, and I think it's been set up really well. We've got a lot of information on Mark without narration or too much exposition being forced on us. He's just a regular kid who goes to high school and works at a burger place with a superhero father who's gotten his powers for the first time. This is the inciting incident, kinda. Getting superpowers upsets the balance of his ordinary world, but he's been wanting this to happen. The problem is that it doesn't set up any real dilemma or conflict for Mark yet. We'll dive into this a little bit deeper when we look at the animation. All right, scene 4, 3 pages long. Now we're at a dinner scene. Mark's mom says that Mark's father probably isn't going to be home in time for dinner. Suddenly, Mark's father whooshes in super fast and apologizes for being late. They have a regular chat, but when the mom asks Mark how his day was, he says, I think I'm finally getting my superpowers. His mom's reply is, "That's nice. Can you pass the potatoes?" So this is a pretty strange reaction from the parents and a strange move from the storytellers. Normally, this would be a pretty big moment that would add to the inciting incident. Remember, the inciting incident throws the character's ordinary world out of balance. From there, it would be about the hero developing their powers and building a series of villains. But because the creative team chose to play this down, I feel like they're making a commentary on superhero comics. I feel like they're trying to subvert the usual comic trope. And if you're a diehard superhero fan, it probably works. And that's something I want to point out. Invincible is a comic about subverting the superhero tropes, and we'll see more examples later on. But I think there's a problem with this approach. If you're a heavy superhero reader, this might have been a refreshing surprise, but if you're not, like me, it might fall a little flat. I bring this up because the animation delivers the same situation but nuances it for an audience that isn't steeped in superhero lore. Back to the scene. Later that night, Mark is on the roof testing his newfound superpowers and realizes he can fly, just like his father. Alright, scene 5 pages long. There's a diamond heist in progress and 3 thieves, one of them superpowered like a rock creature, are running down an alleyway. Mark shows up in a homemade costume and immediately takes the thieves out. His father is nearby and asks Mark what he's wearing. Mark says he's been testing out his powers for the past 2 weeks like this. His father wants to introduce Mark to his costume guy, and they take off together to a tailor shop in a strip mall where they make prom dresses by day and superhero costumes secretly by night. So this is kind of funny. Again, think about how superhero stories have dealt with their characters and costumes. Superman and Spider-Man kind of make their own costumes, right? So having Mark go to a tailor is kind of funny and, again, sort of subverting the normal expectations of a superhero story. Mark tries on a costume but doesn't like it. The tailor says that he can design a better costume if he knows what Mark's superhero name will be, but Mark hasn't thought about it yet. Alright, scene 6, 4 pages long. Mark is back in school as class lets out. The teacher asks a student named Derek to stay behind. This is a story seed that will sprout up later in the series and is connected to the opening scene where Mark tossed the guy with the bomb on his chest. Mark is at his locker when a student bullies another kid. Mark tells the bully to leave him alone. The bully shoves Mark, but Mark uses his super strength and smashes the bully into a locker. An adult catches them fighting and Mark is sent to the office. Mark explains himself to the principal, and the principal scolds him for getting involved. He says that the bully was twice his size, and it's not his responsibility to protect the kids here. He says, "You're not invincible, you know." Mark's eyes light up at the word invincible. Scene 7, 3 pages long. We see a bank robbery in progress. The masked robbers escape through a crowd. They round a corner to their escape vehicle when they see Mark holding up their van. The thieves threaten to shoot Mark, but he replies with, "I wouldn't try that. I'm invincible." And that is the end of issue 1. As mentioned earlier, I really liked the cartoon, but when I went to read the first issue of the comic, it wasn't as engaging for me. And I think it's because the comic is really intended for that diehard superhero fan. I'm not the right audience for this, but the cartoon makes adjustments in interesting ways that did hook me in. Let's take a look at Invincible the cartoon. Keep in mind that the comic is only 22 pages, and the cartoon is almost an hour long. So the cartoon covers the same things as the comic, with a few exceptions, so I'm going to speed through it pretty fast. Alright, the cartoon is Season 1, Episode 1. The title is It's About Time. Alright, Scene 1. We open with 2 White House guards talking about their lives. One of them is going on vacation with his stepson. He tells us this touching story where his stepson was troubled but has really come around and is working hard to be a better person, hence this vacation. The scene surprised me much in the way that I think the comic is intended to surprise its readers. This is a very human moment starting off a superhero story. Pretty unusual, but it's become one of the things that I've liked the most about this cartoon. And they dedicate over 2.5 minutes to this scene. And I want to point out, for the comic, the intended audience is that sort of deep superhero reader, and it subverts those expectations. And I think we've come to a time now where we are so inundated with like superhero movies and Marvel, DC superhero movies, that now we are sort of subverting our expectations of what a superhero story should be told through the television or through a movie. So it's still subverting things, but it's become really self-aware of its audience, knowing that like the general audience is very familiar with superhero stories now, and they're subverting that once again, which is a really interesting way to approach it. All right, scene 2. The guards' conversation is interrupted by the earth breaking open, and 2 villains, the Mauler twins, emerge to attack the White House. The Guardians of the Globe, which is a Justice League analog, are introduced and save the day, including Omni-Man. This team will be important later on in the story. Scene 3. Mark is in the bathroom reading a comic. Mark watches his dad, Omni-Man, on TV. Omni-Man is late for breakfast but flies into the house last minute, and we established a very kind, loving family. Mark still doesn't have his superpowers, but he wants them badly. Scene 4. Mark is in school, and William invites Mark to hang out, similar to the comics, but Mark has to work. They overhear a bully being aggressive with a girl named Amber. Mark butts in to save her and gets his butt kicked. Scene 5. Mark is working at Burger Mark and, just like the comic, discovers his powers when tossing out the trash. Scene 6. Now the family's having dinner again, and Mark tells his parents that he got his powers. This time around, Mark's father has an interesting reaction. He's kind of stoic to the point that he doesn't say anything, and the mom has to kick him to remind him to be supportive. His father offers to train him. Now, this is an interesting change from the comic. It's no longer trying to subvert the trope. Now there's actual character motivation behind the way Mark's father is acting the way he is. We don't know it yet, but it's really an inciting incident for both Mark and his father. Scene 7. Later that night, Mark can't sleep, and we flash back to a memory he has where his father explains that he came from a planet called Viltrum. His father says he volunteered to come to Earth to be its sole protector and explains how he met Debbie, Mark's mother. Mark then tests out his flying powers late into the night with limited success. Scene 8. Omni-Man tries teaching Mark how their powers work. At some point, he gets rough with Mark and punches Mark so hard that he wins him. There's a fraction of a second on the father's face that looks like he enjoyed that, which is strange, but it will make sense later on. They both come home, and Mark is pissed and goes right to his room. Debbie asks Omni-Man how it went, and he says that he went pretty hard on Mark. She asks if he went too hard, and Omni-Man snaps at her. Again, strange behavior. I thought the creative team did a great job of showing a loving father while also kind of peeling back a layer and exposing something underneath Omni-Man's facade. All right, scene 9. Back in school, Mark encounters the bully again. This time, he challenges the bully to hit him. The bully punches him without any effect, calls him a freak, and walks away. There's an echo of dark anger in Mark's face that we saw in his father. Scene 10. Now we get the scene where Mark wears his homemade costume and stops the diamond heist. His father shows up, and Mark wants his father to hit him again so he can prove himself. I thought this was a great scene that showed Mark angry and scared. Yet, there's a great love and kindness between the two. All right, scene 11. Mark goes in to get his costume, but the designer can't give him a great costume until Mark decides on a name. Scene 12. Mark has a heart-to-heart with his mom as he still struggles to control his powers. Scene 13. Mark has a heart-to-heart with his father as they play catch. His father says, "You're different. You actually are invincible." And this is how Mark comes up with his name in the cartoon. All right, scene 14. Mark is in his invincible costume and flies through the city when he discovers someone causing destruction in the city and stops them, declaring himself as invincible. This is where the first issue of the comic ends, and we get a brief end credit sequence. Now, the story so far is good. The personal and internal drama are really the stars of the episode so far. And if this were a drama about a boy coming to terms with his life as a superhero, it would be fine. But it really wouldn't be a big bombastic superhero story. We're missing a long-running conflict that will be the star of the series. All right, scene 15. Now we cut back to the Guardians of the Globe, where we get a few quick scenes of each member and their regular lives when they are suddenly called into headquarters. They all show up to headquarters in costume and wonder what the emergency is. A blur enters the room and starts murdering each of the heroes. We discover that this blur is Omni-Man. His teammates wonder what's come over him. They say, he must be under mind control because he would never act like this. They try to ask him why he's doing this, but he doesn't say anything. Omni-Man eventually murders them all in an incredibly bloody and brutal fight, leaving us with a major question. Why did Omni-Man do this? So that's the end of the first episode of Invincible. Let's compare the comic to the cartoon and see what they changed. For the most part, the cartoon follows the comic pretty closely. Keep in mind that the cartoon has a lot more space and time to deliver the story than the comic, so with that extra time, they chose to swap out a few scenes and add some new ones. In the opening scene of the comic, Invincible is tossing a guy with a time bomb strapped to his chest. In the cartoon, they open with the two security guards talking and then an attack on the White House, where we're introduced to Omni-Man and the Guardians of the Globe. In the comic, Invincible deals with a high school bully after he's gotten his powers and smashes the bully into the lockers, and in the cartoon, Mark gets his butt kicked before getting his powers and then comes back and lets the bully punch him without effect. We also get a flashback scene where Mark's father explains where he comes from. In the comics, this actually happens in issue 2. We get an extra scene where Omni-Man sucker punches Mark and snaps at the mom. We get a heart-to-heart with Mark's mom and dad, and then we get this post-credits scene where Omni-Man kills his teammates on the Guardians of the Globe. So what was the difference in the cartoon that made me like it so much more than the comic? Both stories are subverting the superhero genre, but in different ways. Both have inciting incidents of Mark getting his powers, but deal with it slightly differently. But the real reason I was drawn to the cartoon more than the comic was this final scene where Omni-Man kills his teammates. This, for me, was the real inciting incident of the story. Seeing Mark get his powers and go through a coming-of-age superhero story is nice, but it's not a big enough hook for me. Trying to understand why Omni-Man would kill his teammates is the thing that brings me back for more. The interesting thing is that this doesn't happen in the comics until issue 7. Now, I don't know how true this is, but I've heard that the comic sales started declining, as they often do around issues 4, 5, and 6, and the creative team decided to pivot and drop this Omni-Man surprise in an effort to get interest back in the book. And it worked. The comic keeps going until issue 144. I think that's what is one of the most important things in storytelling, that hook that brings people back for more. It's not easy to do, and with the comic, it took them a while to get there, but it paid off in the end. Not only does Invincible have a great point of empathy, but it also reveals depth of character, which many comic stories don't deal with, and subverts superhero tropes in the process. It's worth checking out. So what did you think about the two storytelling strategies of Invincible? Let me know in the comments below. Again, I am writer and artist Dan Finley, and that's it for this episode of The Story Grind. If you like the show, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next episode.